Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today, must start and must sit wide receivers. We go through each and every game in week 1 of the NFL slate. I'll let you know about your specific players. Should you start them? Should you sit them? And I'm going to give you some helpful information to help you make your own decisions too. If you're first time watching, I'll give you a rundown what you're going to expect here. I'm tracking stats on PFF coverage grade, pass rush grade, fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and as well this season, we'll be bringing in EPA per pass attempt. DVOA, I can no longer, the site, if you guys have ever used it, is just gone. I think that those stats are moving to another site. I don't know where it is. I'm going to use EPA because I think it's a valuable stat. So I'll have those numbers up for each of these teams. I'll go through every matchup to help you decide on what to do with these players. And then I know a lot of you guys are going to have specific questions on should you start this guy or should you start that guy. And great news, I'm going to be able to answer those questions. It won't be in the YouTube comments, but I will be doing every single week on Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. We will be on the STUNT. If you have not downloaded the STUNT yet, the link is down below in the description. It's taken all of your favorite things about your favorite social media apps, brought it to one place, and made it just sports. It's all sports all the time. We're on there. Be sure to drop OwnersBox a follow. The link is down below to download. We have a live room there where you'll be able to jump in, ask me a question. I'll be able to answer it. So Q&A style and just helping you more specifically with start sit. Because a lot of you guys will throw in a question and I don't have context of, is it PPR? How many teams are in the league? What kind of points is it beyond? Is there more points you're getting for explosive plays, et cetera, et cetera? I can do that there. So be sure to check us out on the STUNT. Again, the link for Android and iOS is down below. Guys, let's get into it. If you enjoy today's video, would greatly appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to show us that you enjoy the content from this channel. Hit that like button and let's get into week 1. We'll start with the Lions and the Chiefs on Thursday night. Typically, this video will be coming to you guys on Fridays, but today we've got a lot of time. I'm able to get this out to you early, and we'll be talking about each of these players in the context of if they play. I think there's a number of players that have things up in the air as to whether or not they will be on the field, and I'll give you kind of my opinion either way. But let's start with the Lions. For me, the Lions at the wide receiver position, there really isn't a lot of decisions to make. Amon-Ra St. Brown is absolutely in your lineup. The Chiefs were 22nd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers last season. We're taking a lot of this data from last year. Eventually, probably by week 3, I'll use the updated data from this year, but we'll look at each of these teams, their ranking, and whether or not I think we see much change. For the Chiefs, I think the secondary is a little bit worse than it was last year with some departures. I still think it'll be a pretty mediocre unit as it is, so I think it's one the Lions will look to move the ball on well, but there's really no one else I trust other than Amon-Ra, and Wood is a pretty thin group behind him. On the Chiefs side, this is where things get really interesting. I just saw breaking a couple hours ago, Travis Kelce's hyperextended knee. Apparently, Kadarius Toney is good to go for week 1. I wasn't drafting any Kadarius Toney, so I'm not going to be having to make that decision. So let's go if Kelce doesn't play on Thursday night, because I won't be able to talk to you until then. If Kelce does not play, I think I'd have some decent faith in playing Sky Moore. This is the Lions with dead last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They made some additions to the corner or to their secondary. I don't know if it'll quite be enough. This is still going to be a really good pass protection unit from the Chiefs. 29th in EPA, the Lions were last year. They really struggled. So I think Moore is the guy I would trust the most, but this is a really crowded room that if Kelce does play, as advantageous of a matchup this is, week 1, I'm not taking the risk here. I'm going to go with some more calculated decisions. And the Chiefs, how they spread the ball out to their receiving core is one I don't really want to get mixed into. Tony's an elite talent. I still don't trust him. I still don't want to play him, even if he's going to be actually out there for week 1. As we move to our next one here, the Texans and the Ravens. The Texans on the road at Baltimore as massive underdogs, 10-point underdogs in this game. So what I want to do in this one on the Texans perspective is I do want to wait and see in a lot of these guys, but I do have an advantageous matchup. The Ravens are pretty middling, 17th in EPA, 16th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They're going to be missing Marlon Humphrey. I think the secondary isn't that good. Their pass rush is worse from last season, in my opinion. I've been reading training camp reports, and they haven't really had a lot of guys stick out from the pass rush perspective. That could really help the Texans here. I think Nico Collins would be a decent play. Like, for example, I think I might rather play, if Travis Kelce's playing, I'd rather play Nico Collins than Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, just because I feel like I have a good feeling good feel for Stroud or as Collins being the wide receiver 1 for Stroud. And I think this is a good matchup against the Ravens, who are great against the run, but will struggle against the pass. So Collins is the only guy I might consider. Dalton Schultz at the tight end spot would be someone I'd be comfortable starting for sure. On the Texans side, you see last year, they were actually a top 4 defense in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. A lot of that comes down to just being in a game script where you can run the ball on this team and leading a lot. For the Ravens, Rashad Bateman back to not being 100%, missing practice to start the week. If he's not playing, I actually feel pretty good about playing both Odell Beckham Jr. and not Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers. I really think that if you get down to Mark Andrews dealing with injury, obviously Bateman, like I said, and this is an offense going to pass the ball a whole lot more, I'm willing to gamble on this upside because, look at the pass rush or the coverage grade from the Texans last year, 55.8. It's one they could take advantage of, I think, in this game. So I feel pretty good about both of these players because of the opportunity in the matchup. And then if we thin out the options, then that makes it even better. If all three of them play, I really do want to not take a chance quite yet. I do want to see what we get in terms of the target share. Week 1 for me is not one to take chances. I want to go with more calculated decisions. That's how I feel about the Ravens this week. Now we've got a game here between the Panthers and Falcons where I do have some question marks on guys I want to play. The Panthers we start with. Terrace Marshall and DJ Chark have been practicing, it looks like. I don't think DJ Chark is going to play. And if he doesn't, I feel pretty solid about Adam Thielen because the Falcons struggled defensively. They're 31st in EPA against the pass. They made some additions in the offseason to help improve a really bad pass rush. They did make some additions in the secondary too, Jesse Bates specifically, where they can definitely be better. But I still think the Falcons are a team that you'll be able to move the ball on through the air, and I trust Bryce Young to be able to do so. I think Thielen in the early parts of the season here, if things thin out the wide receiver spot with Chark and Marshall, he could be a guy that I think will be the number one target for Young and was one that he relied on quite a bit in his last preseason game. I think he had like 6 targets, 4 receptions for Young in like a couple of series they had. So I think Thielen could be a decent floor guy, but maybe not a big ceiling, but definitely one of the decent floor that in the flex spot I'm comfortable with and feel good about. On the Falcons side, it's really just Drake London. I'm playing Drake London against this Panthers defense, 25th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers last year. A EPA that ranked 23rd in the NFL as well. So I do think that for London, the way you draft him, he's definitely one you want to start in this kind of matchup for sure. Browns and Bengals. We got the Bengals defense. It's making some changes in the secondary. Will definitely be a little bit weaker, but what does that mean for your starting options between Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper? I'm positive Amari Cooper is a guy I'm going to play. Feel very confident. I think there's obviously a really competitive game here between two teams that are very familiar with each other as division rivals. I think Cooper has enough here as a touchdown guy that I do want to play him against this Bengals defense. It was pretty good last year, but definitely looks a little bit worse in my mind, both in pass rush and in the secondary. So I do feel confident about Cooper. Elijah Moore is a guy I really like, and I do have some good roster or some good amount of ownership of, but this is a wait and see kind of thing because I do think the Browns offense will take a step significantly in the pass game, but I'm not willing to do it in a matchup against a Bengals team that's very well coached defensively. I'd rather wait and see with Moore, even though I think he will be a guy that gets good volume, is used in a lot of different areas of the field, and is very dynamic after the catch. I'm just going to wait the 1 week to see it play out before I'm willing to play him. Next up would be on the Bengals side, not a lot to talk about. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, end of story. There isn't really anyone else I would play. I wouldn't play Tyler Boyd this week. There's definitely some better options for you, like a Nico Collins. I'd still play Elijah Moore over him as well. Boyd is really just a depth guy to fill out your bench. 49ers, Steelers. Really excited about this game. I'm definitely going to be on the Steelers in this one. 49ers dealing with potentially missing Nick Bosa. And then there's now also the conversation about George Kittle being a little banged up and not practicing too. Otherwise, though, on the 49ers side of things, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk are two guys I'm definitely playing. I love Ayuk as a season-long play this year. I think he's going to have a big year, a better year than Deebo. And the Steelers were 25th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers last season, so they definitely struggled against the pass a little bit. And Deebo's a guy, if you did draft him, as much as I don't really love him, I do think that if you draft him, you absolutely have to play him against this Steelers pass defense. On the Steelers side of things, the 49ers are a team that are really good defense. We see it in their EPA mark here. They were third in the NFL in pass EPA last season and graded out really well in their pass rush and in coverage. Miss Nick Bosa, that could definitely help their offensive line that I still don't think is a high-level unit. And they do lose a little bit of pieces in the secondary. They ranked 27th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. That's because they were so good against the run that there was just so much pass volume against them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad unit. I think we all know that. But I do think that the Steelers will struggle immensely to run the football with Najee Harris. They will need to lean on the pass. I'm not sold on Matt Canada. I don't think that this preseason performance is a telling tale of what this offense will be this season. They're not going to be one of the best in the league. But for Deontay Johnson in this matchup, there should be great volume for him that makes me want to play him. And if Kenny Pickett is a little bit better and this offense is a little bit better chance for him to finally find the end zone. George Pickens is a really risky play in my mind that could have an explosive week, but more likely than not, this will be a low-scoring game that for Pickens, I'm not very confident in playing him. Even with the exit of Nick Bosa, or even with the potential of Nick Bosa not playing, I still think this team will generate some pressure against the Steelers' offensive line. So Pickens is a guy I'd rather wait and see on than take the risk to play him against a really elite defense. Cardinals, Commanders, a game not very many of us will probably be watching. It probably won't even show up if you're watching Red Zone very often. This total is really low in this game. The Cardinals side, look, they're not going to tell us who the quarterback is. I'm pretty confident it'll be Josh Dobbs, and when that's the case, there's no chance I'm playing any of these receivers. Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, it doesn't matter. I don't want to take the risk on this offense at this stage, especially with Dobbs being a guy that obviously they brought in such a short period ago that he obviously knows the offense from his previous work with their OC, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to hit the ground running. We've seen it in Tennessee too. So I'm not going to play them, especially against this really talented Commanders front that could definitely drum up some pressure. On the Commanders side though, I'm just not sure if Terry McLaurin plays in this game. If he doesn't, I definitely feel really good about Jahan Dotson. Curtis Samuel becomes a kind of a sneaky start, but between Dotson and McLaurin, I think I'm definitely feeling confident playing both. The Cardinals were good against the pass, or good against wide receivers for fantasy points allowed, but you can see, 26th of the EPA, coverage grade of 66. This was a bottom 10 unit against the pass last year. And I think this is a chance for the Commanders to really catch their stride here with Sam Howell, hit the ground running. And I definitely think they'll be throwing the ball a lot more compared to last season. The Cardinals give them a great chance to build some confidence for this offense, specifically in the passing game. So I'll be playing those guys this week because I do feel good about the matchup. Bucs, Vikings. So we've got a Bucs team that I think a lot of us are down on, me included, but they get a good matchup here. The Vikings, 30th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They were brutal against the pass last year. And I do think that their pass rush will be nowhere near as good as it was last season, which will be beneficial for this Buccaneers team offensively because their pass protection and offensive line is just absolutely brutal. But the Vikings give a prime opportunity to score some points. So I'm definitely playing Chris Godwin. Mike Evans dealing with an injury. That does give me some concern as well, as he obviously has been talking. The talk has been a little bit of him wanting out as well. But I do think that if Mike Evans is playing, this is as advantageous of a matchup as you can get with Mike Evans. I have not drafted him. I've been completely avoiding him in my drafts. But if you do have him, this is as good a matchup as you can get. So I can't blame you for wanting to play him as a guy that's perennially been able to, put up those 1,000-yard seasons as we always talk about. On the Vikings side, this is still a tough matchup. Like, say what you will about this Buccaneers team, they still have a really solid secondary. If the Vikings pass protect well, the secondary and second-level defense won't matter because if you're not drumming up pressure and you give a guy like Kirk Cousins a lot of time, he'll still be able to pick you apart. I'm waiting to see on Jordan Addison. This is still a Bucs team that I definitely don't think I want to go up against when it comes to some good talent in the secondary. I still want to figure out where Addison is at in his target share. So really for me, I'm going to wait one more week before I play Addison in what I still think is a tough matchup instead of taking the risk on him with, the KJ Osborne, the TJ Hawkinson. I want to see the target share against an offense or against in this particular matchup and then potentially get him in a better matchup in week 2. Jaguars, Colts. We got another divisional matchup here. From the Colts side of things, look, Michael Pittman is a player you drafted at a position that you probably want to play him, and I don't like the Jaguars' pass defense anyways, so I do think this is an advantageous matchup for Richardson as a passer. There's an opportunity here. The Jags were 22nd in EPA, 64.1 coverage grade, both bottom 10 in the league, so it gives a good opportunity for Pittman and for Richardson to hit stride here in the passing game. So I would be comfortable playing him because I still think the Jags aren't a great don't have much talent. They're secondary. I don't love Richardson as a passer, and certainly not in week 1, but where you're drafting Pittman, you're probably going to play him. And as long as some good volume's there's some opportunity to break some plays for him. So he's the only guy with the Colts I'd consider starting in the passing game. On the Jags side, look, the Colts were a top 10 in fantasy points allowed to receivers. They weren't as great against the pass otherwise, 20th in EPA. I think even in a matchup against a divisional opponent that probably will be relatively low scoring, I'm pretty confident in Calvin Ridley and his share, like what he's seen in the preseason in terms of target share with the first team offense and his snap share. He's this team's number 1 option. And for Christian Kirk, he's been a reliable target for Trevor Lawrence last season. The slot has been an important part of Lawrence's passing attack, and he's been excellent over the middle of the field in his career. So I still am comfortable playing both of these guys in this divisional game against this Colts team that there's still some question marks. They lose Stephon Gilmore. They don't have that number one option in the secondary. But I think the Jaguars will find success offensively here too. All right, we have so many games to get to here. Next up is Titans Saints. This one for me is pretty cut and dry. From the Saints side of things, the Titans are an elite run defense, probably the best in the league in my mind. Them and the Commanders are just so good against the run. That gives an opportunity for a ton of volume in the passing game. They were second to last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 28th in passing EPA last season defensively. So Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, two guys I definitely want to start. This Saints team is going to have to throw the ball quite a bit, and I think they'll find success here with Carr. So play both of those guys. I'm starting both of them. I'm starting Michael Thomas over guys like, if Rashad Bateman's playing, I'm playing Michael Thomas over Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham. I'm playing Michael Thomas over a guy like George Pickens. This is a great matchup, as good of a match, like one of the best matchups you can get in fantasy for wide receivers, just purely off that volume you'll see. So start those two. On the Saints side of things, or the Titans side of things, the Saints are a pretty good pass defense. With Dennis Allen, they're coached very well. I really think the Saints have taken a bit of a step back against the run. We saw it last year, and they lost a lot of guys in their front seven that left in free agency. I think the Titans will be able to run the ball pretty well. I don't have high expectations for DeAndre Hopkins. He is the number one in this group, though. I'm still going to play him. I don't think the Saints are an elite defense right now. So I do think that the Saints pass rush will have some success with Cam Jordan, but I think the Titans could weather the storm a little bit here, enough for Hopkins to make some plays. Otherwise, no one else to really start in their receiving core. Dolphins, Chargers. We're firing up our Chargers receivers for sure in this one. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are definitely starts for me. I know the Dolphins top 8 in fantasy points allowed to receivers, but you look at that coverage grade, you look at their EPA, like this is a great run defense, but not as good against the pass, in my opinion. If they've got a great pass rush, that helped them be successful last year, but the Chargers have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, in my opinion. When they're healthy, this is a really, really good unit. So I do like both those guys because the Chargers will struggle to run the ball, even if they, put a focus into improving that, brought in Kellen Moore. I still think it'll be tough to do so against the Dolphins. So the volume should be there with Herbert throwing the ball a ton. On the Dolphins side, I think they're going to have a lot of success running the football. The Chargers have been a really good team defending the pass with Brandon Staley. That's really their focus, is containing the pass. But, looking at a top 6 unit in fantasy points, one of the best coverage grades. But Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill aren't leaving your fantasy roster or fantasy starting lineup, regardless of the opponent. So there's no real change here from the Dolphins against the pass. Raiders, Broncos. This one's a pretty easy one to talk about as well. I'll start with the Raiders. The Broncos are an elite unit against the pass. Their pass rush isn't very good. That will definitely make playing their secondary playing at that elite level, like the best in the NFL, really tough to maintain, but they're still going to be really good. And I think a lot of teams will look to avoid attacking, your Pat Surtains, and more looking to attack the Broncos on the ground, because they were second in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 5th in EPA as well. So really good unit. It's really just, in my mind, Devontae Adams will play for your team in this one. Otherwise, there's no real consideration to Hunter Renfrow or anything like that. On the Broncos side of things, I think they'll be able to run the ball really well against the Raiders. They were in a very good coverage team last year, dead last in EPA against the pass. Cortland Sutton is someone I could still play because I still think he'll be the most reliable, consistent target for Russell Wilson, with Jerry Jeudy likely to be out. So I do like Sutton. He's still definitely someone you can play because the Raiders' pass defense isn't going to be quite as good. It'll just be, can they contain this pass rush with Max Crosby as well? So I am playing Cortland Sutton in this one with Jerry Jeudy out, because there is a lot of target share that he's capable of taking as the X receiver in the Sean Payton, Joe Lombardi offense. It's really, really valuable. If you haven't watched my videos, I'm telling you, the X receiver proven through Michael Thomas, and then that first year for Mike Williams as well. The X receiver role is really valuable in fantasy for Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi's offense. So I do feel confident playing him in this matchup, even though the Broncos, I think, will run the ball quite a bit and effectively here too. Rams, Seahawks. Seahawks are in a really interesting situation. It's early in the week, but JSN might actually play this week. And to me, that makes it, even though the Rams are a team I think will struggle a ton against the pass, they were 27th in EPA. They weren't quite as bad fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 18th, more the middle of the road. But man, the Rams without Jalen Ramsey too, this pass defense will be really, really poor. It's beyond DK Metcalf, because I know DK is going to be their guy in the end zone and scoring touchdowns and getting those opportunities. I'm concerned about taking the shot on JSN making an immediate impact with him missing time to start the year. So I'm not looking to play him. A guy like Tyler Lockett, though, is someone I feel a little bit better about. I don't love, but I still think he's a decent flex option because I think the Rams will still be okay against the run, but they don't have a lot of talent in the secondary, and the Seahawks should find success there. But overall, the Rams are a team that maybe the Seahawks are leading real early on and makes it tough to put the ball in the air too much. They might run it a bunch against this Rams team to close out the game. On the Rams side of things, I don't know. Cooper Kupp, I don't know if I'm leaning probably 70% he's not going to play. And even if that's the case, I know the Rams are going to be a team that aren't going to be good. I don't want to take the chance on a Ben Skronik, Van Jefferson. Tyler Higbee would be someone at the tight end spot I'd absolutely start, but we're talking wide receivers here. If Cooper Kupp isn't playing, I'm not looking to any wide receiver, to be honest. But if Cooper Kupp does play, even if he is banged up, absolutely 100% fire him up and play him. No doubt about that, because the volume's definitely going to be there for him. Eagles, Patriots. Make it quick on the Eagles side. I know this is an elite Patriots run pass defense. I'm really excited to see what Bill Belichick has in store with a full offseason to prepare for a massive game. This spread has been dropping too. The Patriots at home are only a 3.5 point dog in this one. Top 2 they were last year in EPA per pass. These are the 1 and 2 teams in EPA against the pass. But that doesn't really change that Devontae Smith is a guy that I'm definitely starting. In your really shallow leagues, like an 8-10 team league, maybe you think about sitting these guys, but I mean, regularly, these guys aren't going to be sitting regardless of opponent. And with a tight spread, we could get a more competitive game that leads to a bit more passing volume for the Eagles, which is a positive for both Smith and Brown. So no real thought there. The Patriots side of things, there's too much question mark with a major change in offensive philosophy with Bill O'Brien. Like, I think they're going to have 2 tight ends on the field a ton. Going to take you guys like Devontae Parker off the field. I saw a pretty ugly report about Juju's knee not being in a really good place. I can't take the chance on any of these guys against this kind of unit, like a elite unit that the Eagles have with being able to keep both Bradbury and Slay. So don't take any chances here on this Patriots team, because this one could be still pretty low scoring too. Last one until we head to our primetime games to close out the week. Packers-Bears. The Packers specifically are the team we got to talk about. I mean, Christian Watson's a guy I'm going to play. I think the Packers will have a ton of success running the football. And Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, those guys will have solid weeks, I think. That means they don't have to lean on Jordan Love quite as much, but Watson is an explosive player that can find a touchdown and just a couple of targets. We saw it last year. So as solid of a matchup this might be against this Bears defense that was pretty brutal against the pass last year, 30th in EPA, 20th in fantasy points allowed to receivers. I question how much this team will throw the football. So Romeo Doubs has looked great in the preseason, looked good in camp. Still don't see him as the number one option, so I don't want to play him quite yet. Like, if this was Rodgers still as the quarterback for this team, I'd feel pretty solid about playing Doubs in this matchup, because we know like the Rodgers loves to put it on the Packers. But for Love, I just don't know how relied upon he'll be and integral to this team, this team winning this game and competing in this game. So I'm not going to take the chance on Doubs quite yet. On the Bears side, the Packers are a team that they can have in the run game. So really it's just DJ Moore. Cole Kmet I'd feel like okay about, not great about. I'm going to play DJ Moore each and every week if I drafted him. He's not someone I have on any of my fantasy teams, but if you draft him where you drafted him, this is a matchup you're probably not scared of quite yet. So Moore is still someone I'd be looking to play. Heading to Sunday night, we got the Cowboys and the Giants. The Giants are a really interesting team for me to be attacking from a fantasy perspective. The question is, do you play Brandon Cooks, right? And I think this is a Cowboys team that will be able to move the ball pretty well. But when you look at bringing Mike McCarthy in, his talk about taking care of the football more, maybe they run the ball at a bit of a higher level. I don't think that's the case, because we're Tony Pollard, Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowdle. Like, they don't have a lot of depth in the running game to be able to put the ball on the ground. I think Dak will be throwing it a fair bit. The Giants were a team that were pretty decent fantasy points allowed, 13th, but their coverage grade's really poor, as you can see. They were 21st in EPA against the pass. I think Cooks, who's had a solid preseason and heard great things from training camp, is a decent flex play. Like, I think that this game will be competitive. I do like the Cowboys in this one. I don't think the Cowboys will be able to run the ball as much as they want to tell you they will. Mike McCarthy in his most recent times calling plays has thrown the ball quite a bit. Now, that was with Aaron Rodgers, not Dak Prescott. But I think there's some confidence here in playing both of these guys. Feel good about both CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks heading into this week. I think Cooks isn't someone that will be extremely explosive in this game, but could give you a decent floor. Monday night, Bills-Jets. Very exciting one here. Two teams that were really good defensively against the pass last season. Let's start with the Jets side of things. Don't think there's much of a conversation to be had beyond Garrett Wilson. The Bills were great in fantasy points allowed, 26th, but this was a team that was leading quite a bit, so teams are moving the ball through the air more often than not at a high volume. 9th in EPA, so a good team against the pass. So there's not really any other options I would play because I do think that the Jets' struggles in protection are not being talked about quite enough here when you're considering other assets. You know, an Alan Lazard, definitely do not play. A Randall Cobb, definitely do not play. This is just Garrett Wilson for the time being. It'll take a few games for me to even... I need to see Alan Lazard have like a couple of good games to consider playing him, and I don't think this week is the week against this Bills defense. On the Bills side, a big question will be Gabe Davis. I would definitely lean against playing Gabe Davis. I still like Gabe Davis in the season, like him in some potential positive matchups, but in negative matchups as the number 2, a guy that's proven to be a little bit inconsistent, but is now finally healthy. I still feel good about Davis this year, but the Jets number 1 in fantasy points allowed to receivers, number 1 coverage grade, 6th in EPA, still at a good solid pass rush too. I think this is just Stephon Diggs, and I'm not going to play a Dalton Kincaid. I'm not going to play a Gabe Davis or anyone else like that in this offense. It'll just be Diggs on the road in a game that probably will be pretty low scoring. All right, we're going to have a few weeks of running through 16 NFL games. I always love this, the first few weeks of the season, having everybody out there for every single week. Sundays have just become an awesome for the 4 p.m. slate too, getting a lot of games there. So we ran through every game. I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions about, guys, whether or not you should start or sit over these different options. Again, we will be live on the Stunt, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, so make sure you're tuning in there and I can help you specifically with your team. Not a lot of people are able to put the time in to do that. I want to do that for you guys on Fridays, so be sure to download the Stunt. The link is down below in the description. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, so if it was valuable information for you, would really appreciate it if you hit that like button. And again, comment down below. Feel free to share any thoughts you have for week 1. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.